It is now 10:05. We'll get started. As you know, today's sole purpose is to provide an overview of the Family Homelessness Challenge Grant Round 2 application. We'll also share some details about what to expect during the duration of this grant. Next slide, please, Jaspreet. All right, here's some Zoom quick housekeeping tips. You were automatically put on mute when you arrived. Please utilize the chat box if you have any questions for us during our time together. This meeting is recorded and it will be distributed out to all of our participants. Next slide, please, Jaspreet. All right, I'll start by briefly going over our agenda for today. First, I would like to introduce myself. I am Crystal Brooks, the Technical Assistant Supervisor here at Cal ICH. To begin, I want to welcome everyone who is here joining the space today. We're excited to be here and share all the important details with you. Second, we'll be breaking down the application to get you familiarized with the program purpose, as well as all the key components that are associated. Next, we'll provide some grantee touch points, reporting information that is required, and also hear from Mendocino County about their experience with FHC grant. And then we'll briefly share some information about the transition to HCD and close out with a live Q&A. And feel free to actively engage in the chat and we'll ensure to make space for those questions. Next slide, please. All right, so to get us started off, I'll pass it off to Nicole Zaragoza-Smith. She is our Program Implementation Supervisor to provide details about our program purpose.
Thanks so much, Crystal. So I'm going to go ahead and take you all through that first agenda item, the RFA walkthrough and application walkthrough. I want to start by just highlighting the program purpose here. FHC2 is very closely aligned with FHC1. And so when we're looking to that purpose, we're really looking for these applicants to submit an innovative proposal that expands, complements, augments, and or strengthens their FHC1 proposal, right? And then we're going to link that to the FHC1 objective, which was making families' experiences of homelessness rare, brief, and one time. We also want to highlight that these proposals should demonstrate potential for being scaled and replicated to support statewide efforts to eliminate family homelessness. So again, the overall program objective is the same. The way that FHC2 has been expanded is that we're looking for you to create that connection to your approved submitted FHC1 proposal. A couple reminders of some of these key terms and their definitions. Rare means prevented whenever possible. Brief means ended quickly whenever homelessness does occur through a focus on housing first approaches and housing outcomes. One time means ended successfully the first time. And innovative here means that your proposal complements, augments, strengthens a community's efforts to address and end family homelessness. Again, innovative here is relative to a community's existing efforts, and it does not necessarily mean a paradigm shift. Next slide. So when we're looking to the program priorities, there are a few things that we will be looking for. We want to look to awarded applicants to serve the eligible population, right, with their FHC2 funds. We're looking for awarded applicants to comply with all of the principles of housing first. Awarded applicants will be required to provide data elements, in a manner consistent with state and federal law to their local homeless management information system for tracking in our homeless data integration system, that statewide system. Cal ICH will only fund proposals, right, that expand, complement, augment, and or strengthen their FHC1 proposal. So you do need to demonstrate that link. Cal ICH will only fund proposals that offer promise of being scaled and replicated to support statewide efforts to address and end family homelessness. As a reminder, this was a challenge grant. We were looking for interesting and innovative ideas and to look and see how those were implemented in your local jurisdictions so that we can elevate best practices. Right. And then finally, we will prioritize applications that demonstrate cross-system collaboration, multi-funder initiatives, and innovative efforts that coordinate across funding streams and systems. So to put it more specifically, there is an expectation that communities are leveraging other resources and/or funds in these proposals. Next slide. So a little background and a highlight on the available funds. So per statute, FHC includes $30 million that will be distributed across 2 disbursements, right? That first disbursement was $17 million, right? And so that was that half of that 30 million, that 15 million, plus $2 million of the CalICH admin. We redirected those administrative dollars to augment and expand those FHC1 funds. So this time around, there's just the remainder of that FHC grant funding, $15 million. So I want to be clear that there's a little bit less money available in this round, but the applicant pool is much, much more limited. Next slide. So to touch on those eligible applicants, again, the pool are FHC1 grantees that remain in compliance with those grant requirements. You need to also demonstrate adequate progress towards self-identified prioritized objective of your FHC1 proposal, right? And that will be demonstrated through your quarterly reporting, including the report that is due next week. We also are going to be looking for proposals that demonstrate the most promising and innovative practices, which could be scaled and replicated to support statewide efforts to eliminate family homelessness. Next slide. The eligible population to serve remains the same from FHC1 to FHC2. It's those family households with dependent minors. And just to provide a little clarification, that includes but is not limited to pregnant parents, parenting youth, households engaged in reunification, and/or child welfare services. Next slide. So how can you spend these dollars? Broadly speaking, FHC2 funds must be spent in alignment with the program objective in the awarded proposal, in support of the eligible population identified in the proposal, in compliance with Housing First and within the grant term. These are the broad strokes that you need to follow. And so you can see here that many of these components are outlined in statute, right? And then refined by the approved proposal. When you're tracking eligible uses of funds, we do ask you to use specific categories. So let's go to the next slide. And these have remained consistent for FHC1 and FHC2. I'm not going to go over these in detail, but broadly speaking, you're looking at rapid rehousing, operating subsidies, street outreach, services coordination, system support, delivery of permanent housing. Next slide. Prevention and shelter diversion, interim sheltering, improvements to existing emergency shelters, and administrative costs. So here what you can see is that we have eligible uses, right? So you can go through an eligible use sort of determination using those criteria provided on the eligible uses slide. And then the categorization is really just our tracking mechanism for your budgets and for your expenditures. I do want to provide just a quick highlight on administrative costs and reiterate, administrative costs are those incurred by the city, county, or continuum of care that is a direct grant recipient from CalICH. And these are those costs incurred to administer the program allocation. These entities are able to use up to 5% of their allocation towards these administrative costs. So this does not include any, program implementation, those service provider costs, things like that. Next slide, please. In terms of statutory deadlines, we released the RFA on December 29th of 2023. We're hosting the applicant conference today. Applications are due at the end of February. So that's February 27th of 2024. We will complete application scoring and ranking during the months of March and April, and we will post a notice of intent to award no later than April 29th of 2024. As a reminder, awardees must spend all funds, so FHC1 and FHC2 funds, by June 30th of 2026. So for this second round of funding, you'll have a little less than 2 years to spend any awarded FHC2 allocations. Next slide. So now I want to provide an application walkthrough. And I do want to highlight that this application is quite a bit different than the FHC1 application for anyone who was involved. The FHC1 application was essentially a 20-page work plan. We outlined specific areas that we wanted you to provide information on. And this time around, it's a much more detailed questionnaire style application that has been programmed into Cognito. One of the reasons that we did that is because these programs should be very closely linked, right? Your FHC1 proposal and your FHC2 proposal. And so we have existing information about your FHC1 proposal and your progress to date. And so we wanted to integrate that information together so that we could look at these two proposals in relationship to one another. So walking through the different sections of the application, in the first section, we're just going to collect, who's applying here, who's the best contact for this application and a subsequent award, and then collect any contracting information. The second section is going to be quite key. This is your opportunity to provide a comprehensive summary of your FHC2 proposal. So please don't be discouraged by the fact that that text box shows up as quite small. It expands. There are no character limits here. So we do want a full scope summary of the FHC2 proposal. This includes describing the model that you're trying to implement, telling us how you plan to implement it, and then describing how this proposal is linked to your FHC1 proposal, right? How it innovatively expands, complements, augments, and or strengthens that FHC1 proposal. And then finally, an opportunity to describe how this proposal could be scaled or replicated to support statewide efforts to eliminate family homelessness. The subsequent sections are more of that opportunity to more clearly describe the relationship between the FHC1 proposal and the FHC2 proposal. So section 3, what you'll find is an excerpt of your FHC1 self-identified prioritized objective. And then you'll have a series of selections where you can indicate whether you need to update that for FHC2 or whether it'll remain the same. If you're updating it, you'll provide that updated self-identified prioritized objective, and then you'll talk about how you came to that determination, right, to either keep it the same or update it. Next slide. Similarly, for the target population, you'll see your FHC1 target population, then you'll be able to indicate whether it's going to be the same or if you need to make an update, again, what that update is and how you came to that rationale. For the goals, you're going to find 2 discrete sections. So the first section allows you to describe if your FHC2 proposal has a direct impact on any of your FHC1 goals. So you'll see each of your FHC1 goals listed. You'll be able to, again, indicate if there's any modification that you need to make and then make that modification. The subsequent section, so the part B here, is where you can list any new goals that come as a result of your FHC2 proposal. Here, there is not a hard and fast rule around when you should modify an FHC1 goal versus when you should add a separate new FHC2 goal. We knew that these programs were going to be very closely linked, so we wanted to offer some flexibility for you to either augment those original goals or add new goals. And it might just depend on what that exact relationship is between your 2 proposals. If you have any questions about that, you're more than welcome to reach out to us in advance of the application deadline. In the next section, we're going to ask you to describe your key implementing partners and personnel. You'll have a table to fill out for the partners and then a table to fill out for the personnel. And there'll be a narrative section underneath each of those. We just want to highlight to please take care and ensure that what you're describing in these tables in terms of partner organizations, in terms of personnel, is accurately reflected in your submitted budget. Those two components should speak to each other quite closely. Next slide, please. In the budget section, we will ask that you upload a standardized budget for FHC2. This utilizes the same template as FHC1, right? But we're looking to understand what specific activities, functions, personnel, etc., you're looking to fund with FHC2. As always, you have that opportunity to also list any leveraged funds, and that may include FHC1 funds here. There will be a narrative question or two, around prudent and effective uses of funds for you to complete as part of the budget. And the final section of the application is related to compliance. This is a series of certifications for you to demonstrate that your jurisdiction remains in compliance with several components of FHC statute as well as the FHC1 contract. Next slide, please. So after you submit your applications, we review, we make awards, there are a few expectations that I wanted to highlight here. Again, grantees are expected to provide universal data elements within their local HMIS as required by AB 977. Once an application is submitted and approved, no substantive changes to the program design are allowed unless grantees inform Cal-ICH of the change, explain the impact of that change, and receive written approval from Cal-ICH to proceed. Again, this program is very closely tied to the proposal as described in your application, and we want to maintain fidelity to that in order to explore the practices and innovative strategies that you all are trying. So we need to understand if there needs to be a change, what that change might be, and come to an agreement together. Do also just want to highlight that you may receive ad hoc requests for information as this program is intended to be evaluated, right, to replicate practices across the state. And along with that, at the end of the grant period, we are expecting that all grantees provide information and products developed with these grant funds on the delivery models and in support of the overall program goal to scale and replicate those practices to eliminate family homelessness across the state. That's all I have for the RFA and the application walkthrough. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions during the Q&A. I'll turn it back over to Crystal.
Thank you, Nicole. All right, Jaspreet, can you go to the next slide, please? All right, let's get into some grantee touch points. Displayed here are the touch points in which FHC grantees will interact through Cal-ICH. First is through office hours. Second is the Cal-ICH grants inbox, which I'll go into in a bit. And also we have the quarterly reports and fiscal deadlines. So Cal-ICH provides ongoing support to the grantees, and we're committed to ensuring that our grantees are in the position to effectively expend those funds. So if you do receive other communications from us in between time, just know that's what we're trying to do. Just ensure that you're getting all the help that you need and making sure that you could contact us at any time should you have questions. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to share some information about how to get in contact with Cal-ICH. So we have the office hours avenue as well as the Cal-ICH grants inbox. The office hours does take place on the second and fourth Tuesdays of each month, and that happens from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. This is a space that we use to provide updates, reminders, also answer questions from grantees. We do share the office hours calendar invitation and link with just the primary contacts of each jurisdiction, but you are able to share that with other people that are that work with your community if you need to do that. So you could forward that on to anybody who you feel needs to receive that information from us. We also have our grants email inbox, and you could submit questions to us at any time. Once we receive your inquiry, we ensure that we send the questions to the proper team to answer them accordingly. And that is the CalICH Grants inbox email. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. I'm going to pass it off to Rachel Austin, who is our reporting and monitoring analyst, to provide some important information regarding reporting for FHC2. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Crystal. I'm just going to go briefly over quarterly reporting and reiterate some of the information that Nicole already shared. Reporting for FHC round 2 will mirror the reporting required for FHC round 1. These reports are cumulative, covering program data from the date your contract was executed through the end of the report period. These reports are required quarterly and will be prepared by you using an online template. We'll send you a link to the report template at the start of the month, and it will be due by the end of the month. You can start the report at any time after receiving the link. It does not need to be completed in one sitting. You can save the report and return it at any time, which becomes especially relevant if you need to share that reporting duty with other colleagues. Keep in mind that CalICH may make changes as needed to report templates to obtain relevant and needed information. If changes occur, you will be informed of those changes and provided a PDF copy of the report template for your reference. In the chat, I'm going to share a link to a document for you to reference when planning for quarterly reporting. The CalICH grant reporting schedule summarizes reporting dates, when the report is available, the cumulative period to report on, and when the report is due to CalICH. Just one moment. So please save that for future reference. It does include the reporting information for all other CalICH programs as well. Next slide, please. Included within the body of the quarterly report form, you'll find an option to submit a budget modification. Budget changes are required when there's any decrease or increase to the budget for any eligible use category or any significant or material programmatic change. Budget modifications can also be made between reports if needed. To request to complete a budget modification in between report cycles, or if you have any questions or technical issues with reports, please just reach out to us at calichgrants@bcsh.ca.gov. Next slide, please. Next, I'd like to share a resource with you that outlines the fiscal deadlines required by statute. And this is something that Nicole already touched on. If you navigate to the second page of this document, you'll find requirements for the FHC program. You will notice that this program only has one fiscal deadline included in statute for round 2. And that is that FHC round 2 program funds must be expended in full by June 30th of 2026. Keep in mind that any funds that are not expended by that date must be returned to CalICH. The grants monitoring team will be in contact with you as these deadlines approach to provide status updates and to provide any needed support to assist you in meeting these requirements. I'm just seeing a question in the chat, and we will circle back to that, but I will briefly mention that the deadlines outlined in statute cannot be extended. Next slide, please. Lastly, please remember that all records must be retained for a minimum of 5 years after the termination of your contract with CalICH, which is on March 31st, 2027. These dates and requirements can be found in your standard agreement. Please do not hesitate to reach out to grants monitoring with any questions relating to any of the information that was shared today. Thank you. Now I'll hand it back to Crystal.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, so I'm excited to announce you will hear from Mendocino County. We have Megan Van Sant, who is the Senior Program Manager there. She's going to give you a glimpse of what Mendocino's been doing behind the scenes with FHC. You'll hear about some challenges that were faced, some positive outcomes that were seen as well. And she'll give us some insight into their Front Door Families project. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Crystal. And thank you everyone for a little bit of your time today. I'm excited to share our experience with our Family Homelessness Challenge grant. I'm going to be pretty quick on going through what our project is about and some of the opportunities and challenges we've experienced, but I welcome questions either now if you have enough time, but you're also welcome to reach out to me directly too, if you had any questions or thoughts to share. So I think we can do the next slide, Jaspreet. So our project that we funded with our Family Homelessness Challenge grant, it's built around our Family Homelessness Challenge grant, but it has expanded beyond that, which I'll explain, is called Front Door for Families. And it was born out of our recognition in Mendocino County through our own experience, through my team, that families didn't know where to begin when they were facing housing instability. They weren't sure if should I go to CalWORKs? Am I supposed to go to the shelter? Am I supposed to talk to my school? Am I supposed to go to the public housing authority? So there was just so many, and also so fragmented, such a fragmented system of resources for families that where to begin was an open question. And honestly, families would ask us, because we do a lot of work in homelessness and also with other benefits, and we didn't actually know where a family should begin. So that's where Front Door for Families was born. We applied for the Family Homelessness Challenge grant and created a project that provides a single point of entry for the whole county for where to begin if you're a household with children experiencing homelessness or feeling at risk of homelessness. The project is built around the housing problem solving model. We sought some technical assistance from a national trainer on the housing problem solving concept, and first spent time training ourselves and our community partners on housing problem solving. So that's the core of how we begin. But the Front Door for Families project is also an entryway to apply for potential financial assistance. So it's built again around that initial conversation and consultation, and we chose words very carefully. So it's a consultation with a guide, and then it can lead to direct financial assistance if that's what the family needs and they're eligible for. I invite you to go check out our website. It's called frontdoormendocino.org, where everything is lined up. The website is designed to be both a self-help portal, so it has a lot of information for families to begin their housing search or begin resolving their housing challenges on their own, as well as the place to make an appointment. And what was new for us is we set up an appointment system, kind of like you might make an appointment system for a haircut online. It's actually the same technology behind the scenes. So a family can can set their own appointment through the website without having to talk to anyone, through either an in-person appointment in Ukiah or a phone appointment, and in either English or Spanish. So it kind of guides you to the appointment that suits your needs. Next slide, please. So again, what we built our project around the experience of a client, and we're committed to that, but it creates some issues on the back end that are kind of fun to explore. So the experience of a client is they start in one place, and they don't need to evaluate the own severity or urgency of their situation. We don't block anyone out, whether they're literally homeless or at risk of homelessness. They are experiencing housing instability. They start at the front door. So we didn't want to create barriers right from the beginning. So a client themselves had to figure out what they were eligible for. They come to the front door, and then we do all the work on the back end to figure out what bucket they may fit in. So again, the experience of the client is you start at the front door, and it's worked pretty well. So next slide, please. So the client comes through the front door, but under the hood there's a whole lot going on. So we were committed to braiding funding streams. We understood that was the charge from Family Homelessness Challenge grant. So we took that on and believed in it. And we ended up braiding a lot of funding streams. So the Family Homelessness Challenge grant is the core funding that sort of started this project. But we have folded in Bringing Families Home, which is a project through the California Department of Services. the Housing Navigators Program, the Housing Navigation and Maintenance Program, both through HCD. Homeless Housing Assistance Program, HAP, provides some funding for direct financial assistance. We have a partnership with a nonprofit called Make It Home that provides furniture and household goods. And our plans are to bring in community supports through CalAIM. It's a whole thing to CalAIM to augment and support this project both now and in the future. And we also imagine that we soon will be folding in some funding from Homeless Housing Incentive Program, HIP, which is through Medi-Cal Managed Care. So I just list all those to show that we are braiding funding streams from not only different kinds of funding sources with their own program parameters, but some of them come from different agencies throughout the state, HCD, Department of Social Services, Medi-Cal Managed Care. So there's different state agencies we're working with as well. Next slide, please. So this chart is an internal tool that we started using, or I'm starting to use with some of our team to kind of make sure we're keeping track of the different rules for each funding stream, because that's what's really complicated. And you don't need to look deeply at this, but what I wanted to highlight here is that each of these funding streams may have limitations on the age of the parent. We folded in some funding streams that are specifically for parent and youth. So there's one that's for 18 to 21-year-olds and another one for 18 to 24-year-olds. They all have different timelines in which the funding needs to be spent and have different dollar amounts that are available to us. Our really secondary and probably really interesting driver under the hood is our program and partnership with Bringing Families Home, which is all very much geared to families involved in the child welfare system. So I think 40%, maybe half of our referrals that come to Front Door for Families are for families involved in child welfare. Partly because many families involved in child welfare are experiencing housing instability, but also because we've built this partnership with the Child Welfare Department to bring in those referrals. So that's a whole different level of complexity. Importantly, it's also a very different definition of homelessness. The Bringing Families Home allocation allows us to serve clients who are experiencing housing instability, but they may not meet the same criteria, stringent criteria, certainly not like a HUD level, perhaps literal homelessness, although some of them are. But if they're in a home that can't accommodate the child for whatever reason, we're able to serve them as well with Bringing Families Home. So what it means is on the back end, there's a lot of figuring out where somebody falls in terms of what funding source can support them. And we were committed to making sure that that was not something the client had to worry about. They're dealing with a lot. They've got a lot of trauma going on. They've got a lot of complications in their life. They're trying to stabilize their housing. It's not their job to figure out what they qualify for. It's ours on the back end, but it's not easy. So that's one of the both fun and challenging parts of our project. Next slide, please. So what opportunities has this created? Braiding funding streams in this way significantly amplified our ability to provide services. It augmented the amount of funding we had, and it also augments the population that we can serve. Because again, some of these funding streams have a broader definition than others. They're very along the restrictiveness. Our collaboration with Child Welfare Services has been really beneficial to families and to our mutual programs. Our team has worked with families with children. That's been a priority of ours for a long time. But until we linked up with Bringing Families Home, we haven't had the direct communication with child welfare in the same way that we do now. And it's really been very beneficial for us, super beneficial for child welfare, and most importantly, really beneficial for the clients to have, they're going through their process with child welfare. Front Door just focuses on their housing situation. We're not involved in the kinds of challenges they're experiencing through the child welfare system, but we're aware of them and we communicate openly about them. So it's been really extraordinary partnership. We've also benefited, and I don't even honestly quite know how this happened, but our public housing authority asked, and we said, sure, chose to give preference points to Front Door clients for their tenant-based rental subsidy vouchers. So that was super exciting for us. It was their own idea. Again, I'm not totally sure why they were willing to do that. But what it's really done is amplified our program, because the Public Housing Authority, which is critical for people's stable housing, their ability to afford housing, has also a close partnership with us. Our communication with them is much better because of it. And clients that are working with the Front Door program do have preference points to be able to eventually achieve sustainability through a rental subsidy voucher. The other opportunity we found is because we're a county-based organization, we're a county program, and we are embedded within our social services department, particularly our eligibility and family assistance division. Our team members have a lot of experience and capacity and permission to work with Medi-Cal, CalFresh, CalWORK. So part of the service that we're able to offer clients who come to our front door is the ability to check in on their other benefits in a really easy, efficient way. We can verify their Medi-Cal, we can make sure their CalFresh is working, we can make sure they have that connection to CalWORKs, and we can help problem solve for them in that way as well. So those are the opportunities. Next slide, please. Some of the challenges of the way we've designed our project, it's really administratively complex to manage a bunch of different funding streams within the same project. So it's not easy, and I need to work on some tools so that there's more clarity both for myself and our team members on what we're doing. It's quite complex to track all those different funding streams. I will be honest, entering and tracking data in HMIS is really difficult. It's difficult even without a number of different funding streams. But to give an example, when we work with a client, we will enter them in HMIS through the Family Homelessness Challenge Grant because we're offering them services, but they may end up getting direct financial support through a different program. So we have to do a different HMIS entry in order to track those expenses and that work as well. So it's labor intensive. And I will note, I do question the utility of it as well. HMIS was really designed to do really close work around HUD-defined definitions of homelessness, street-level homelessness, shelters, coordinated entry, people that were further along the spectrum of homelessness, perhaps. And many of the families that we work with are eligible for our services, but they're not like literally street-level homeless. And so it's not been a great match, but we know we have to do it, and we're committed to it, and we found ways to find it to be useful as well. I mentioned this before, but having the competing and overlapping definitions of homelessness is hard. It's a hard element to this project. And I think by the end of our Family Homelessness Challenge Grant, we'll have some really good tools to work with all of that complexity. But right now we're still figuring it out as we go along. Other programmatic challenges, although working with the child welfare system is super critical. It's a critical population. We feel very committed to working with those families. They are at the highest risk for many, many reasons. And they also, if your family is involved with the child welfare system, there is a lot of complexity going on with that family. There's a lot of expectations on the family if they're working to reunify with their kids. I think, as all of you would know who work with these families, if your children are detained, you lose access to CalWORK's housing support, you lose access to cash aid, you may lose access to SSI benefits that your children were receiving. So the experience of being involved in child welfare has intense financial implications for families as well, and their ability to continue to sustain paying rent. So there's just a lot going on with those families, and it requires a lot of sensitivity. We've also noticed that when we want to support families to become self-sufficient, partly because they've got a lot going on in their lives, their sustainability plans sometimes are not super strong. And for us on our staff level, figuring out how to support a family who really doesn't have a way to sustain their housing in the immediate term, and how you support them until they can get to that stable place, and how you work with them when you can tell that their sustainability plan is maybe a little bit rough and they are really just trying to hold it together. So it's required a lot of sensitivity on our part and challenging as well. And then finally, we had a much higher volume of need than we originally anticipated. If you go to the next slide, I think I lay it out a little bit. So yeah, we thought, when I first wrote the Family Homelessness Challenge Grant, I thought we'd serve 60 households in our first year. We've served over 300. So it was just way higher volume than we expected, and we weren't totally prepared for it, and we still aren't prepared for it. So we have to figure out how to work with a pretty significant increase in volume and still do quality work. So that's our challenge, and probably will be what we will be addressing in our application for FHC2 funding, in that extreme increase in volume that we hadn't expected partly because although we were committing to braiding funding streams and braiding programs, that's not exactly how I designed the original application. So as other programs folded into Front Door, it just expanded our capacity in that way. I think last slide, perhaps, and that's it. So if any questions, I'm happy to answer them. This has been a really exciting project for our team. We have a lot of our staff are all working on different pieces of this project, and it's been really exciting for us to invent something new, build it, and then see how it works. So I will stop there and see if there's any questions or comments, and thank you.
Thanks, Megan. I'll go ahead and jump into the questions that have been rolling in through the chat. The first one I see is from Ben. If you've made changes or amendments to your existing FHC1 award, will those be reflected in Cognito, or does it only pull information from the FHC1 application? This should reflect any changes that you've made. And so if you see any issues with that or need some assistance, you can go ahead and reach out to us directly. The next question I see is from Jimmy Chan. What is the budget limit that we can apply for in the FHC2 grant fund? There is not a limit. Each applicant is able to request the amount of funds for their particular proposal. I mean, obviously be aware that this is a slightly smaller pool of funds, about $15 million. And then you will be asked in the budget section to describe how you could scale your proposal if more or less funds are available, because there will be a process to help get us to that 15 million. Let me see here. Next question. Is there any possibility that the state will allow no cost extensions beyond the June 2026 deadline? Can you give a little more context, Megan?
I think I'm just, is that going to be a very hard deadline? The June 2026, you believe it is?
Expenditure, okay. Yep, it is. It's in statute. There's not much we can. And if you do need any support or have any questions around flexibilities or meeting those expenditure deadlines, we will be reaching out to folks over the next month or so to offer the opportunity to meet. And then, of course, you can always reach out to us at any time through the inbox. The next question is from Ben. Will the quarterly reports stack like the HAP funding? In other words, for a given due date, grantees will submit 2 reports, one for FHC1 and one for FHC2. Ben, full disclosure, that hasn't been completely settled. If at all possible, we would like to streamline that and put these things together, especially since we're looking at like how these projects are very, very closely related. But that reporting won't start until, after our transition to HCD. So there's a lot to happen between now and then. Let's see, will there be a PDF of the application questions without going into Cognito and going question by question? No, there won't. The best guidance that you're going to find is from the RFA. The reason that we have not provided a PDF is because, again, there's a lot of that customized components that went into each of the applications. Megan, it looks like we have a question for you. So from Natalia, was the Front Door Housing Navigator in Mendocino County a designated staff member, or was it an outside service provider?
Internal staff. We hired a county staff member to be we hired a new position to be our primary housing problem solving guide, and then existing county staff also continue to provide that service as well.
But
So
primarily
with anybody.
Yeah. But primarily 300, most of that 300 clients were by one staff person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any additional questions for Megan while we have her here? Well, we'll take a look at the chat to see if any more come up. If not, right now, you can always access that frontdoormendocino.org, or you could reach out to us via email once we send the materials out from today, if you'd like to have her direct contact as well. All right. Thank you, Megan, for sharing. All right. I'll briefly go over the transitions to HCD slide. Jaspreet, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as CalICH has mentioned in our past Office Hours spaces, all of our CalICH grants will be transferred to HCD in fiscal year 24 to 25. As the entities both under BCSH, the council, and HCD will continue to coordinate closely to ensure that we have a seamless transition for grantees. And ultimately transferring the administration of the grant programs to HCD will allow for greater support and technical assistance to grantees. So as we mentioned,